I am going to be going through the phonograms, the 70 basic phonograms for spell, to write, and read today. So our first phonogram that we teach is a, ah. Now I want you to notice when I say that, I'm giving a pause in between each of the sounds. Mouth is nice and open. This is a vowel, and if you read step number 9, where it talks about the difference between vowels and consonants, vowels are always made with the mouth open. And so this is a nice example of that. A, ah. Nothing should be closed. It's not It's not like that. I want the mouth nice and open. Another reason for that pause is so that the student can hear very distinctly 3 sounds. When we let them slide it all together, I don't hear 3 distinct sounds. And so that's going to come into place when we're teaching spelling. And you say, well, which sound is it? And they're like, oh, what do you mean which sound? Okay, that's kind of like a mush of sounds. So we want very distinct sounds. So when you start teaching phonograms from the very beginning, you want to make sure that you're teaching good habits from the very beginning. Okay, so that's ah. The next phonogram, actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it this way. Ah. And then I have k, s, k, s. Now, let me point out something when I'm teaching these. All right, we have in speech production, when we're saying words and sounds, we have a function of our vocal apparatus called voicing. And the voicing is when the vocal cords are actually vibrating and producing that buzz. So when you hear me right now, it's because you're hearing my vocal cords. Some of the sounds that I say, however, are not voiced. And so when I'm teaching the phonograms, I want to make sure that my student understands which are the voice sounds and which are not, because that's going to affect the way that we use those phonograms when we're building spelling words. So ah. Put your hand on your throat, and let's just say one of those. Ah. Put your hand on your throat as you're listening to me here. Ah, and feel. Do you feel a buzzing? Yes, because my vocal cords are vibrating. That buzz is produced by the vocal cords. So, yes. And what we do is we say that's motor on. So the motor is on when I say ah. When I say these 2 sounds, the motor is off. I do not want to say k. Put your hand on your throat and say k. And what you're going to feel is the vibration at the end there. The reason is I added a vowel sound, Listen how I say it again. K. Is a vowel. I am no longer saying just this. I'm adding what we call, in dictionary terms nowadays, they call it the schwa. It's kind of an indistinct, who knows what it is, vowel sound. Maybe you would think it's the as in up. Whatever, it's a vowel sound, and that's voiced. And this phonogram, the 2 sounds that it says, neither of them are voiced. So when you're practicing your phonograms to teach your kids, make sure that you do it voiceless, and make sure you get rid of that extra at the end. It's not k, it's k, k, and s. So let me say it again. K, s. No voice. Okay, again, 2 sounds, 2 distinct sounds. Now this one especially, it's important that we keep those distinct. And I'll come back to that and explain why that's so important. This is the second phonogram I'm teaching, and so I can practice good habits from the very beginning. I'm not going to let the kids say ks. That's something different, okay? So it's k, s. There we go. All right, next phonogram, d. This is another one where teachers tend to want to say duh. It's d. Now, if you have a habit of adding that and I'm going to tell you something. We don't hear what we say. We think we're doing it right, and we're not aware what's really coming out of our mouths. I challenge you to go through your phonogram sounds and record yourself and listen. What are you actually saying? Because I've heard more and more teachers say d. This is a voice sound. D is voiced, but it should not have that vowel at the end. It should be simply d. And one of the ways you can kind of kick that habit is clench your teeth. So say it d. And it's hard to add that when your teeth are clenched. Why is that? Vowels are made with your mouth open. So if I clench my teeth, d, I'm prohibiting the mouth from being open and adding that vowel sound. So I'm going to say it again, d. All right, the next phonogram is g, j. Again, let's make sure we don't add the vowel. It's not g, it's not j, it's g, j. Let's say it again, g, j. Ah, o, oo. Again, clear, distinct sounds. Let me say it again. Ah, o, oo. Oo as in to, go to the store. Okay, this one is a voiceless sound. I believe it's very hard to hear this one because it's a quiet sound. You'll notice also it's the first phonogram that has 2 letters. So we call that a multi-letter phonogram. So although it's taught with the alphabet, it is really a multi-letter phonogram. Okay, it's the first one that comes up. This one also comes with a rule. And so, but let me get the sound first. It's qua, qua. And you notice that's hard to hear because it is quiet, quiet. So make sure, hand on throat, make sure you're not saying qua. That's different. This is qua. And it's at the beginning of the word quiet. All right. This is, like I said, this one comes with a rule. Q always needs a U. U is not a vowel here. Now, when we're teaching phonograms, we want to teach by sounds. I do not want to say this is QU and it says qua. I don't want to say this is the letter A and it says a, ah. I do not want to present both letter name and letter or phonogram sounds to the student from the very beginning. I want to get into the brain, drill in the brain just the sounds, because when we're reading sounds. We're not reading letter names. Okay, letter names are for talking about rules. They're for spelling bees. They're for identifying letters of the alphabet, that kind of thing. But when we're teaching reading, we want to focus on the sounds. But you notice when I said the rule, what did I say? Q always needs a U. I'm using letter names. So one of the questions we get asked is, how does a student learn letter names if we're just focusing on the sounds? We will teach letter names, we just don't do it from the very beginning. We want to drill sounds when we're reviewing phonograms, and then when we talk about rules, and we're talking about what role that letter has in a word, then we use letter names. So that's why I'm using the letter names here. So Q always needs a U. U is not a vowel here. Usually that letter, U, is vowel. But here it's part of a team where it's helping this say its sound. Okay, so when I see that card, I teach that rule, and then every time we see that phonogram, we'll practice saying that rule. We'll get that into our minds by the repeated drill. E, E. Now that's a vowel, so of course it's voiced. E. O. It's not la, it's o. Just hold that sound. All right, so let's talk about speech development for a moment. When children are developing speech sounds, some of them come in first. When a baby is babbling and they're ba ba ma 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 ma, one of the things they're doing is they're using the vocal apparatus that's right there out in the front. They're using their lips usually, ba ba ma 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 ma. They're using a vowel sound, and that's because that's what they see. When they see you talking, that's what they're seeing. They're seeing what's out there. They're not seeing your tongue hit the back of your throat when you say g. They're only seeing the front of your mouth, and so that's one of that's why they start babbling the way they do. So as children develop speech, and I'm talking about English here, there are some sounds that are more difficult to make than others. B, it's right there, it's out front, and so that's usually kids don't have a problem producing that sound. I'm not saying that they use it correctly, but just making the sound. They usually get that one quickly. Some of the sounds, they're produced in the mouth and they're hidden. And the tongue placement, or the way that the tongue is interacting with different articulators is what we call them. The roof of the mouth, the ridge that's behind the teeth, the tongue, the palate, the way that those articulators interact with one another, it's hidden and it has to be precise to hear that sound correctly. So there's some sounds that are what we call later developing, meaning if you have a 2-year-old that's really getting going with her talking and she's not saying "ol" correctly, that's normal. We don't expect a 2-year-old to necessarily be able to pronounce this sound correctly. Now, if you have a 9-year-old that can't say "ol," that's a problem. And we would expect a 9-year-old to have been able to develop that sound. So the s, r, and ol, those are later developing sounds. And so there are things that you can do with your kids to help them if they're around the age, maybe 4 or 5, where okay, by now we should expect some of these sounds to be coming in. And one of the things to do is to have a little mirror. I didn't bring one with me here, but like a little makeup mirror, a little, maybe a little stand-up mirror. And when you're teaching the phonograms, have that mirror in front of the student so that they can see what their mouth is doing. And with this phonogram, what I'm doing is I'm putting my tongue, the front of my tongue, on that ridge as behind my upper teeth. I am not closing off. My tongue is not touching the sides or the inside of my teeth because that's where the air is flowing. The air is coming up through my lungs, through the throat, and out the mouth. And so most sounds come out through the mouth. And so I'm not closing that off, otherwise I wouldn't be able to say anything. The sound would then get redirected to my nose. But here it's coming out my mouth, so it's oh. And sometimes just showing the child where that goes and practicing a couple times a day with a mirror and showing them how to make that sound, sometimes that kind of kickstarts getting that sound in there. Now, just being able to say a sound is one thing. Being able to start using that sound correctly in speech is a completely different thing, because this tongue is moving, I don't even know how many miles a minute. There's so many actions that it has to perform while we talk, and training the tongue where to go when you're coming out of a word, when you're going into a word, in the middle of a word, that's what therapy is all about, is retraining those tongue movements. But sometimes just showing the child, I believe it's step 5 in the Spell to Write and Read book, where Wanda talks about using a mirror and really looking at the different mouth parts and helping the student understand how to say the sounds. So study step 5. So this is O. That's a voiced consonant. We have B. And again, it's not B. Notice how my mouth went open and I added a vowel sound. It's B. And again, if I have a struggle with adding that vowel, I clench my teeth and I'll say it. B, B. And that helps me to not say the vowel sound. Okay. This is f, f. This is another sound that some little kids will have a hard time with. They'll actually use this to replace the th sound. So they might say my tooth, instead of saying tooth. Okay, and notice both of those are made in the front of the mouth. They're both voiceless, and so that's one of the reasons why there's some swapping there that goes on. And that's something, that's normal in the process of learning speech. That's normal. Again, for a 2, 3, 4, even sometimes a 5-year-old, that can be normal. By 5, I kind of want to be watching, is this improving? A 9-year-old, that's a problem. Okay, so this is no motor. Motor off for that one. Now, I'll tell you something. One of the ways we can tell the difference between vowels and consonants is vowels are made with the mouth open, and they're voiced, and every syllable must have a vowel. Okay? Consonants can be voiced or not, and the mouth does not have to be open. This one, it is. Mouth is nice, wide open. And I remember thinking, now, how could I possibly classify this as a consonant other than it's not voiced? How would I do that? And then I realized that where the articulation is occurring is actually in the throat. It's actually at the vocal cords. So the vocal cords close, and then it pushes the air through. I don't know if it actually closes, but it's pushing the air out. And so the the coming in close proximity, which is part of what a consonant is happening down here. And that's why it was kind of like, where is that happening? And then I realized it was down in the throat. So that's that phonogram. K. K. Again, it's not k, it's k. And let me say something about this phonogram. This is k, s. So notice that this phonogram is the same as the first sound of this one. And so how does a student know if they're supposed to use this one or that one? Well, that's where our spelling rules help. But also sometimes with the little ones, I'll teach this as the tall k. And that way they get the idea it's that one. You just have to practice. This is k, this is k, s. And so they learn this has two. There is a spelling rule that we learn that tells us when we use which of those two sounds. And so they just have to learn that. But sometimes when you're first getting started, you might teach that as the tall k. But we kind of want to be careful of those kinds of cues. Notice I am not using letter names. I do not want to teach phonograms to music. I avoid all kinds of motions. There is one phonogram I'm going to use, and I'm going to show you a tip for how I teach it, but I don't use that. Once the student hears the sound pattern, I don't use that anymore at all. In fact, I use it just to get the sound pattern in there. But I want to drop those cues, because what happens is the student becomes dependent on the cue, and in the process of reading and spelling, we need to know these just like that. We don't have time for the brain to go from here to there to the cue to generate the sound, and then however we're using it for reading or spelling. We need instant retrieval for both reading and spelling. So again, that's k. This is I, j, j. Now, this is a consonant. It's voiced. And notice my mouth is completely closed. So how is the air from my lungs getting out? If I'm completely closed off my mouth, how does the air get out? Well, it's being redirected out through my nasal cavity. This is one of three sounds that we would call the nasal sounds. And I know that on one of the cards it says the nasal, whatever the phonogram is. And frankly, I don't teach that because there's three different sounds, and so what? It's coming out the nose. Okay, so that's how we know that one. All right, this one is n. And just like n is another nasal. And what does that mean? It means that the air is being cut off. It cannot come out the mouth because my tongue is blocking it. The tongue is in the same position as for the ol. It's maybe a little bit back, but the tongue is actually touching all of the inside of my upper teeth, and that's blocking the airflow. And so the air is coming out my nose, and so that's And that's why kids sound so funny when they're saying mommy, or no, let me say mommy, mommy. It sounds funny because if the air is being blocked out the nose and they've got a cold, then we sound funny because air is trying to get out somehow. This is another voiceless phonogram. P, p. Okay, so it's not p. And some people say, well, how do my kids know what I'm saying if it's so quiet? Get their attention. Look at me, eyes on me, and have them watch your mouth. P, p. Hand on throat. P. No voice. Okay. Now, this is a tricky one, and I had a request from one of the moms. Okay, 6 months. Okay, Joy, make sure that you're playing the Phonogram CD for Alexandria, so she's hearing those sounds. And let me just say, I think I've said this in one of my other videos, but one of the things that's really amazing about the human brain is that by the 6th month of life, the human brain has been hearing the sounds of its first language or any other language that it's exposed to. And at birth, a person can learn any language on the planet, okay? But by 6 months of age, the human brain has basically suppressed the production of sounds that are not found in the first language. And so Alexandria, who's 6 months of age, has been working on that. And so her brain is more tuned in to the sounds of English. Joy, I'm assuming you're just teaching English unless you have a second language in the home. So her brain has basically filtered out those other sounds that are found in other languages, or suppressed the development of those sounds. And now her brain is really pinpointing what are the sounds in the language that I'm being exposed to. And that's one of the reasons why it can be so hard to learn another language, is because there's new sounds that are not part of your language. So let's talk about this one. Now this is one of those later developing sounds. I said that the O and these two, they're later developing sounds. These, when as a speech therapist, these were the sounds that, just English. Okay, that's what I assumed, but you know, I could be wrong. These are the sounds that in speech therapy we're most likely to work with kids on. So I remember in college it was like, I want to go be a speech therapist and work on S's and R's. And actually S and R are letters. They're not the sounds. So the sounds that the kids have problems with are S and its partner Z, and then the R. And those are later developing. It's harder to make those. This one, because it's inside the mouth and the tongue has to be in just the right position and has to be the right tension, and it's hard to see. It's a hard one to work on with kids. This one, again, the tongue has to be in the right position. And I'll tell you, as a child, I struggled with this one, and I had to have speech therapy to fix it. So ways to help. Again, show your child, have them looking at a mirror. First of all, in speech therapy, one of the things we do is we work on Now that is not this. Is the vowel form of that. Let me see if I can find that card real quickly for you. And I just passed it. Here it is. Okay, so this is R, and this is Do you hear the difference? R. So when I say the word train, which one am I saying? Train. I'm saying this one. Okay? If I said terrain, that would be this one, because every syllable must have a vowel. And I'm bringing in the vowel and then the R that goes along with it. So one of the ways, when you've got a child that's still working on developing this sound, one of the ways you can help them is to help them hear if the is making its own syllable, then you're using this one. And the word train, one syllable. So I can't be using this one. Something else to consider, kids, a lot of times they know what they're supposed to be saying. Their mouth just isn't cooperating with them. And so they'll say twain, they'll use the w or something like that, or twain. And you say, no, it's train. And they go, that's what I said. Because in their head, they said it right. Now, their mouth didn't say it right, but in their head they did. And they get very frustrated. It's like, can't you hear me? I'm saying twain. And you're going, no, you're saying twain. And they go, no, that's not what I said. Because they can discern the correct versus incorrect speech in you, but their discernment skills are not exact when it comes to their own speech. That's what I say. When you're learning the phonograms, record yourself as you say them, and then go back and listen. And listen, are you adding the Because many times you're not aware of what you're saying. You have to really fine-tune your own sound discrimination. So that's one thing you can help them. For production, like I said, we worked in therapy a lot on this sound with kids, but just to isolate the sound, not the but just to isolate this sound, it helps if the kids kind of pull their lips apart, like that. It's kind of, and one of the things I did for discrimination between the two is this is very brief, versus you can hold that one. So, for example, do I say rabbit or do I say rabbit? So I wonder, it's very hard to lock onto this one. Some people say some people say r. So it depends on how you want to teach it, how you say it, but make sure that you're not saying okay? This one, s, z. So put your hand on your throat and tell me. Well, you can't tell me, but is it voiced or not? S, z. Oh, wait a minute. The first one is not. The second one is. Actually, that's the only difference between these two sounds. So when you hear s, you're hearing voiceless. you're hearing the air squeeze past the tongue that's right there behind the teeth. S, okay? When you hear z, tongue didn't move. It's in the same place. The air is flowing the same way. The only difference is the voicing. So the first one is not voiced. The second one is. S, z. T, t. U, Now this sound, that third sound, is kind of hard for some people to pinpoint. Let me say it again. U, as in put. And I like to joke in my seminars, like somebody got punched in the gut or a labor contraction, something like that. So it's the So U, That is different than O, oo. O, oo. U, U, okay? W, w. V, v. X. Now, I told you at the beginning when we were teaching this phonogram, you want to make sure that the students are saying k, s, that they're hearing two distinct sounds. Pause in between. Get that habit established from the very beginning, that they hear this phonogram as two distinct sounds, maybe even a little pause. K, s. This is the second phonogram you teach. Notice I'm almost at the end of my alphabet. I'm almost done with the first 26. This is actually the 24th. And listen to what this is. Ks, ks. It is the same sounds that you heard in this one. K, s, same exact sounds. So this, they're distinct. This is actually two sounds that are being squished together. So if you started from the very beginning teaching with good habits, k, s, and then you teach this one, ks, you will not have a problem with them hearing the difference when you're dictating or being able to produce it. If you let them get sloppy, then that can be a potential problem for you. This is y, it, I. Y, it, I. And it is the buddy. Where is it? Here we go. It is the buddy to my it, I. So this phonogram, the adults trying to teach this program, this is the one that trips them up every single time. And I'm not going to go into an extensive discussion about this phonogram or the think to spell or anything like that. But let me just clarify. This is both a consonant and a vowel. When it says y, it is a consonant. And that tends to be used as a consonant at the beginning of a word or at the beginning of a syllable. So like yard, okay? And then if you make a compound word, it would be backyard. So it's the beginning of a syllable there. So as a consonant, it says y, and that's the most common use of this. Then we have the two vowel sounds, and we're going to lock on to the buddies here. This is it, I. The two vowel sounds of this are also it, I. So this is y, it, I, and this is it, I. So we want to help the students see the relationship. And when we get to the consonant vowel page, we're going to talk about this. This English words don't end with the letter I. And so when we need to hear I or I at the end of a word, that's when we bring in what's called the stand-in vowel. So this is going to come in and take the place of the it, I when English says we can't use it there. Okay? And there's lots more to say on that phonogram, but that's how we teach that phonogram. You want to be very careful that you do not add other sounds to this. Do not teach this with E. Do not teach y, it, I, E. And that's a whole, we can talk about think to spell another day, but people will say, well, I hear the E. Well, let me tell you something. With phonograms, we're going to teach spelling as though the words were actually saying what these phonograms were teaching in isolation. In the flow of speech, none of these phonograms are as precise as what we're teaching now. But we're not trying to duplicate pronunciation with our speech. If we do that, we will never learn how to spell. We are focusing first on spelling, trying to lock in a good, what's called sound picture for the spelling, and then we say the word however we say it. And again, I could go into think to spell another time. Okay, last of the single letter phonograms, this is Z. Z. And this is the same as, let me find my phonogram card. It's the same as the second sound of this one. Z. And there's a rule that goes along with this one that tells us when we can't use this. And so that's getting into the whole spelling rules and that kind of thing. I'm just focusing on phonograms today.